Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Nightfall Terrors. I know many of you enjoy using these videos to help you fall asleep, so before you start to drift off, it would be great if you could leave a comment sharing where you're listening from around the world. If you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Now, let's get cozy, settle in, and begin. The Well in the White Woods, Part 2, Missy's Account. The smell hit me first, antiseptic, mixed with something older, harder to place. The linoleum squeaked beneath my shoes as I made my way to the front desk, trying to project as much confidence as I could manage. The woman behind the desk looked up, her glasses resting low on her nose. "Can I help you, dear?" My mouth felt dry. "I'm here to see my brother, Jeremy." Even saying his name felt strange, like I had to remind myself of it. "I'm Rachel." Her face lit up with familiarity. "Rachel, your voice is just like it was on the phone. I should have recognized you." My pulse quickened. She believed it. Rachel had called ahead. I tucked that information away, steadying my tone. The nurse guided me through twisting hallways under buzzing fluorescent lights. "He's changed lately," she said, lowering her voice. "More agitated. Talks about strange things. Just be ready, okay?" I gave a nod, my throat tight. "He'll be all right with me. I know he will." That lie tasted awful. His door was like the rest. Solid, institutional, a small square window at eye level. The nurse unlocked it with a click that echoed through the corridor. "I'll be right outside. Call if you need anything." The room was smaller than I'd imagined, maybe 8 feet across. Just a bed with tightly tucked corners. A window that filtered light into a dull gray. The walls were bare, scratched here and there, marks that hinted at something darker, and in the corner sat Jeremy. He noticed me right away. His eyes weren't wild, that's what shocked me most. They were sharp, aware. "Who the hell are you?" His voice was quiet, almost soft, which somehow made it worse. I swallowed. "Mr. Redacted, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm a student journalist. I'm writing a story and I wanted to ask about the White Woods." His expression changed immediately. A shadow passed over his face. "The White Woods." He gave a sharp laugh. Not a real laugh, more like a warning. "You think those woods are just some tale? The legends, the stories. He stood abruptly, and I fought the urge to step back. I saw it with my own eyes. He tapped his temple. I saw the room. A chill ran down my spine. "The room. Say it like you mean it." He lunged toward a stack of papers, scattering them across the floor. Drawings, or something like them. Most were frantic scribbles, but a few chilled me. One showed a boy in a tunnel, light shining ahead, but with eyes above the light, watching. Another showed the same boy kneeling, his shadow bending the wrong way. "The room isn't a room," Jeremy whispered. It's... He clutched his head, fingers digging into his scalp. "It doesn't want just anyone. It chooses carefully." "Jeremy," I asked, trying to stay calm, "what happened when you disappeared?" He froze. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Steady, almost clear. That somehow made his words worse. "Dad took me there. To the well. Said it was my turn. like his father did before. Told me I had to see what waited down there. But when it came out, he shivered. I wasn't what it wanted. It chased me out. Through the woods, through the dark. When I told them, they brought me here. There were too many questions, not enough time. I picked the one that mattered most. Your grandfather knew too. The well, he said distantly. He only showed me the well. The room. You have to offer yourself. You have to be chosen. What do you? If you're serious about this, find the cabin. It's in the White Woods. Before I could press him further, a sharp knock broke the tension. Rachel, time's up, dear. John and I were waiting outside when we saw the commotion. Through the window, we watched as Missy was escorted out by 2 guards, tears streaking down her face. We ducked behind the corner, hearts racing. Try that again, one of them warned. And we'll call the police. Pretending to be family is a serious crime. The ride home was silent. That night we ended up back at the oak tree, our usual spot. John had gone to grab sodas from home, leaving Missy and me alone, perched on the old branch where our initials were still carved from 3 years ago. She hadn't said much since we left the hospital. The sunset lit the sky in purple and gold, making the White Woods look almost peaceful. We sat in silence, legs swinging above the ground. But this sunset felt heavier than the others. Remember when we said the woods were enchanted? I asked, hoping to draw her out. Back in middle school, Missy hugged herself, smiling faintly. Yeah, wizards and dragons. We were such nerds. Were. That got a small, genuine laugh. Shut up, Matt. The wind moved through the leaves, carrying that same pine scent. And something else. Something old. Her laughter faded. Want to talk about it? I asked. About Jeremy. She curled into herself. The Missy I knew never shrank. She was the one who punched Tommy W. in 8th grade for calling me a loser. She always took up space. I don't even know where to begin, she whispered. Anywhere. I'm listening. She breathed shakily. He knew I was lying. He screamed that I was one of them, that I was part of the room, trying to trick him. Her voice cracked. And the worst part, he meant it. He believed it. Jesus, I murmured. You don't get it, she said quickly. He used to be normal. Then he brought up the cabin, and I tried to act cool. But he saw through me. She told me everything. About the well, the room, what Jeremy had said. And the deeper we went, the darker the woods seemed around us. Feels like one of those horror movies we used to watch, I said, trying to lighten the mood. Remember, staying up late at your place, getting yelled at for eating all the popcorn. This isn't a movie, Matt. Her voice was firm. This is real. Jeremy is not okay. Hey, I turned to her. This isn't your fault. He wasn't okay long before we ever got involved. The White Woods stretched ahead, dark and vast. So we need to find the cabin, I said. Yeah. She looked at the trees. There was fear in her eyes, but something else too. Determination. We'll figure it out, I said. Like always. When did you become the hopeful one? Since you needed me to be. She looked at me, really looked. When did you grow up? I didn't need to answer. She already knew. Missy, I said softly. Yeah, I'm sorry. For all of it. Without thinking, I pulled her into a real hug. Not one of those awkward ones. but the kind that means something, that promises protection even when you're not sure you can give it. She didn't pull away. Her shoulders trembled. When she let go, her eyes were damp, but she smiled. A real smile, not the brave one, not the forced one, just her. "You know what's strange?" she said, brushing her face. "Part of me wishes the scariest thing in these woods was still just our imagination." "We can't go back," I replied, "but we can go forward. Together." "Thanks, Matt," she whispered. "Really?" John called from below, reminding us it was time to head home. Missy started to climb down, then paused. She kissed my cheek, fast but certain, and made her way down like someone who'd climbed that tree 100 times. She wasn't shaking anymore. I touched the spot where she kissed me. Something shifted. Had been shifting for a long time, maybe, and I just started to see it. Whatever lay ahead in those woods, at least we'd face it together. Maybe that was enough. The sun dipped lower, and the white woods darkened, as though they sensed we were coming, as if they were waiting. The door shut behind me. My hands still trembled from the day, a day meant to bring answers that only left me with more questions. Missy's words echoed as I paced the floor. Both Jeremy and my father had mentioned the room. Whatever it was, it mattered. I thought about going to Dad again, but remembered our last talk. His eyes had turned cold, like he wasn't even seeing me. No, he wouldn't help. That's when I thought of Grandpa Joe. I tried to forget him for years. That harsh old man who treated family like a burden. Most memories were fragments, tobacco smoke, locks clicking, Larry's muffled sobs in a dark closet. We'd only seen him a couple of times as kids, but the scars remained. Still, with his health failing and death looming, Dad had brought us back. Here, Missy's words echoed in my mind, about knowledge being passed down, generation after generation, father to son. The way she described Jeremy's cryptic hints made something click. My legs carried me up to the cabin before I'd even decided what to do. The hallway stretched out like a tunnel, with Grandpa Joe's room waiting at the end. From that distance, I could already hear the rhythmic beeping of machines keeping him alive, alongside the soft hiss of oxygen tanks. The closer I got, the more my nerves pushed back. The door was ajar, and the smell hit me first. Sterile antiseptic mixed with something older, like damp soil. Grandpa Joe looked less like a man than a memory. His skin was thin, almost translucent, stretched over bones like wire. I'd seen mummies in school textbooks that looked more alive. His eyes were shut, but somehow I knew he could still see me. He looked like someone already halfway into the next world. I touched his shoulder, lightly at first, then firmer the third time he stirred, eyes cracking open. Gran, a dry sound like leaves rustling, came from his lips. "Sorry, what? What? Water? Do you want water?" He gave a faint nod. I helped him drink. Every swallow looked painful, like swallowing glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough and broken. "Knew you'd come, Matthew." I froze. A chill ran through me. I wanted to believe it was just something he said, but there was clarity in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "How did you?" Boy, his cough took over, harsh and violent. He covered his mouth with a tissue, and I tried not to see the red marks blooming there. Time's short, always is. Why spend it chasing ghosts? You've got a good life, good land, a girl. Who cares? This isn't about stories, Grandpa. Larry is gone. Don't you care? For a moment, something shifted in his eyes. Fear, regret, maybe both. Not enough time left to argue. Some doors, he coughed again. Some doors need to stay shut. I tried to push him for more, but he drifted into old memories, comparing me to my dad. How Dad never questioned anything and just followed orders. I was about to give up when he suddenly gripped my wrist with surprising strength. Stop digging, he rasped, or you'll end up like that nosy woman Jolene. My mom's name hit like a slap. To me, Mom was more story than person. Jolene, the reporter, that's all I ever really knew. She vanished while chasing a story, not long after Larry was born. We were all still living on the farm, though I was too young to remember. Now, in that cold, sterile room, something shifted in my head. Pieces started clicking. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind wouldn't slow down. At dawn, I returned to Grandpa's room, needing real answers. But it was too late. The room was empty. The machines were off, tubes scattered like shed skin. Then I saw something through the window. Dad coming out of the white woods, pushing the wheelbarrow piled with blankets. He rolled it into the barn, then carried the folded blankets inside. He paused at the stairs and looked straight at me. That silent moment said more than any words ever could. Whatever this was, it was my responsibility now. The shadow of my mother's disappearance loomed larger than ever, and I had to understand what had really happened. I spent hours buried in the local library's archives, but nothing came up. No obituary, no death record, not even a missing persons report. In a town this small, that kind of silence wasn't just strange. It was chilling. I felt like I was chasing shadows. Still, I stayed in that dusty basement, scrolling through decades of microfilm. Every dead end made it worse. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. At some point, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Eventually, I had to call it. Larry would have known what to do. I keep talking like this is my story, but it's really his. Larry was the one who figured things out, who read people like open books. That's when it clicked. Maybe I wasn't thinking like him. Maybe I had to. Back home, I walked into Dad's room. The air was heavy with old whiskey and silence. He was sitting on the bed, staring out the window like he was watching something far away. His eyes looked empty. For a second, I felt something close to sympathy. Maybe he was just as trapped as I was. But deep down, I knew he had answers. About Mom, Larry, and everything tied to this place. Dad. My voice came out softer than I meant it to. He turned his head slowly, like moving hurt. His eyes didn't really see me. He grunted, barely registering I was there. I've got this school project, a family history thing. I need to ask some questions about Mom. School. His eyes narrowed. It's summer. My stomach twisted. Yeah, it's a summer assignment. Just some background stuff. Her maiden name, what she did for work. He stared for a long time. Then, something in him faded. Don't remember much. I pushed it away. It hurt too much. He sighed. She worked at the local paper. Her maiden name was redacted, that's all. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I spent hours flipping through phone books, making call after call. Finally, I heard a voice that stopped me. "Hello," I stammered. "Who is this?" Her voice was quiet, but there was strength behind it. "I'm Matthew. I think you might be my grandmother." There was a long pause. I thought the line had gone dead. Then I heard a tiny sound, like someone trying not to cry. "My daughter's boy. How did you find me?" "Phone book," I said. "But that's not important. I need to know." "Oh, Matthew," her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. We should have been there." She told me everything about leaving town after Mom disappeared, the rumors, the way people looked at them, how my grandfather refused to leave until he died last year. Each word was another puzzle piece I didn't know I was missing. Eventually I asked the big question. "Grandma, do you know what Mom was working on before she vanished?" The phone line buzzed louder. "What are you doing, Matthew?" I wanted to tell her everything about Larry, the well, and the fear growing in me, but I didn't want to scare her. "Larry's gone, Grandma, just like Mom, but I can still do something. I have to try." She sighed. It sounded like wind through dry leaves. She was looking into the town well. My blood ran cold. She thought it was just stories. But something changed. She got scared, said she found something big. Then, she disappeared. After that, strange people started asking about her. I had to leave. I thanked her and asked her to stay in touch. She sounded relieved, like she'd been holding that inside for years. Their next stop was the old newspaper office. Most of what I found there was useless, but the editor gave me one important lead. My mom had a writing cabin in the White Woods. She loved it out there, he said. Said it was peaceful. Never cared for those old ghost stories. The same cabin Jeremy told us to find. I wanted to tell Missy and John, but this moment felt like something I needed to face on my own. That night I waited until everything was quiet. Fully dressed, I lay in bed listening. When Dad's door finally shut, I slipped downstairs and out into the thick, humid air. The woods at night were different. My flashlight barely pushed back the dark. Shadows felt alive. I passed the well, its black opening like an eye in the ground. I knew Larry was connected to it, but rushing in without a plan would be stupid. After hours of searching, just when I was ready to give up, I saw it. A small cabin, nearly swallowed by the trees. The wood was faded, the windows empty. Inside, chaos. Papers everywhere. Someone had been here. Jeremy, probably. There were food wrappers and signs of life. I dug through everything, looking for a thread. She had started this search when she was young. Jeremy's story had drawn her in. But most of the files were either useless or obviously tampered with. Someone had tried to bury the truth. Then I saw it. Something strange about a desk drawer, a hidden compartment. Inside, one piece of paper. At the bottom, her signature. And the words on it made my blood turn to ice. The Challenger Deep is not the deepest point of the ocean. The Challenger Deep is the deepest point of our planet, 6.8 miles below the ground we walk on, and nearly completely desolate. A true marvel of the earth, and a miraculous piece of geography. Up until recently, most scientists believed that the Challenger Deep was the deepest point of our Earth. Keyword, recently. Work for the NOAA, or National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. As a submersible pilot, I've been on countless dives and seen countless things. It is an amazing job, one that I can't imagine ever not taking. If there is one place to appreciate nature and life as we know it, it's the ocean. Yet, the vastness of the ocean is a horrifying concept. We are slow in the water, and in the parts of the ocean where you can't see anything below you, it is hard to shake the thought of some massive marine predator snatching you up in its jaws. Despite this, our research knows no bounds, and around a month ago, my team made a massive discovery. A shift in the tectonic plates showed us that in the cracks of the Challenger Deep, there was something below it, an entirely unexplored and unknown region of our world. The team was ecstatic, and negotiations for a press release were immediately brought to our supervisor. Unfortunately, he decided not to go ahead with the news just yet. According to him, after talks with the heads of the NOAA, they wanted us to go on an expedition to see what was there, and then showcase our findings to the world. I wasn't pleased with this, but I knew that it would make a better headline in the news if we actually found stuff down there. As one of the most experienced submersible pilots, I was chosen to head the mission. It would be a solo mission, one that, in my supervisor's words, would change the way we saw the ocean forever. So, after a ton of preparations and warnings and papers, my submersible was hovering over the water. My legs pointed directly at the opening to this new, deeper subsection of Earth's crust. My submersible, named Apollo by me, was reinforced heavily, with intense fortifications and the best titanium money could buy. She was a beautiful thing, one that I could never see myself as worthy of piloting. Yet, with one swift motion, I was dropped into sea. I won't bore you with the details of the descent, as nothing out of the ordinary occurred. I saw numerous creatures, critters and otherwise, but nothing. There was something I hadn't seen before, aside from a sperm whale swimming above me that made me nearly shit myself. After roughly 3 hours, I had finally hit the Challenge Deep. Admittedly, I was a little scared. Despite my numerous adventures into the bowels of Deep Blue, I had never actually been here at the bottom. It was empty. Not a speck of life besides maybe some bacteria. If loneliness could have a textbook definition, it would be this: dark, cold, and desolate. The fact anything could live down here whatsoever was unbelievable. Move forward. My intercom sprung to life, jolting me out of my complete awe. I had completely forgotten why I was here, trapped in the sheer complexity of the nothingness of this place. I complied, moving Apollo upwards a bit. And that's when I saw it, a massive gash in the seafloor, stretching for what could have been miles. It was wide, too, almost the entire width of a school bus. This wasn't what was shown in our scannings, with the gap being smaller and less wide. Whatever we had seen before, it had expanded. I reported this to my supervisor, who shared the same mild perturbance that I did. Maybe another shift occurred here recently. Maybe his lackluster answer to my report did not inspire confidence, but I had to keep going. I'm about to enter the opening, I said, with a very obvious amount of uncertainty in my voice. Go ahead. Good luck, man, my supervisor responded. And with that, I entered the new deepest point of our Earth. The opening was normal in nature, with nothing but rock and earth surrounding my descent for the first 20 meters or so. However, after this, it all became dark again. There was no more wall, no more gash. I checked my sonar, and my mouth dropped to the floor in sheer amazement. I was inside a gigantic cave, nearly 1 mile in diameter. I was at a loss of words, my thoughts taking over where my mouth couldn't. My mind began to race, with intense ideas and fears and terrors unveiling themselves. What could be down here? Is it dangerous? Will I die? Etc. I reported my findings to my supervisor, who was, just like me, completely starstruck. Are you sure that's what you see? My supervisor sputtered out. Yes. This submarine had been equipped with all the latest technology, and one of those was a radar, just in case anything like a whale or other large creature happened to be approaching me. This radar never failed, but it hadn't sprung to life in hours due to the lack of anything big at this depth, yet it was suddenly firing off. I moved to look at it, and to my both amazement and terror, 5 large blips were moving towards me. I tried to keep myself together, desperately breathing in and out in a pathetic attempt to keep myself from hyperventilating, but it wasn't working. Nothing of this size should be down at this depth. My mind began to picture beasts, monsters, and ravenous creatures coming to rip me apart. In my nervous state, I hadn't realized my supervisor had been trying to talk to me. After nearly tripping over myself, I clumsily reopened the line. Why have you stopped? What is it? My supervisor sternly, yet curiously asked. There's 5. Something moving towards me, sir. I have no idea what they are. I stammered out, my voice shaky and completely broken by the fear that gripped my throat. Wait, are you serious? How big are they? My supervisor asked. I checked the blips. They were 5 seconds from my position. They weren't massive, but they were still too big for this environment. A solid 7 to 9 feet in length, roughly 8 feet. Just then, I felt a strong, hard, and intense hit come from the outside, not like something was trying to break in, but rather like something had bumped into Apollo. I checked the 3D cameras, checking the side at which I felt the collision. I caught a glimpse of a tail floating off into the darkness. It looked rigid and crustacean-like, shaped almost like an ace of spades. As I tried to make sense of it, another bump came from above. Whatever these things were, they were strong. Not strong enough to break through titanium, but strong enough to move the vessel a solid foot. I checked the cameras again, this time seeing a pair of legs. They looked like they came from some sort of insect, akin to the legs of a spider, but thicker and with barbs. Once again, it floated into the darkness. Once again, a hit came, this time targeting the pilot's chamber, scaring the piss out of me. I didn't need to check the cameras. The thing hit my window and it didn't move from my view. I was completely stuck, entranced by what could only be described as a miracle of nature. A living fossil, floating in front of me, locking its round, pure black eyes with me, practically hypnotizing me to admire its sheer beauty, was a massive, yellowish-tan prehistoric creature. Eurypterid, commonly known by paleontologists and biologists as a sea scorpion. I was dumbfounded. Sea scorpions had gone extinct over 250 million years ago, when the Great Dying happened, otherwise known as the Permian extinction event. Eurypterids were completely wiped out by this, so I was at a loss of words. No words could ever describe what I was feeling. I think it was admiring me back. It surely hadn't seen humans before. It tilted its insecty head at me, wondering what I was. Suddenly, more of them came to the window, dumbfounded at what they were seeing. Baby sea scorpions sat atop what I assumed was their mothers, analyzing and internalizing what I was. I began taking photographs of the sea scorpions and sent them to my supervisor. He beamed back to me on the intercom as the cheers of my colleagues rang out in the background. This is an amazing find. Do you see anything else? Not right now, but I'll update you if I do. As I resigned from the intercom once again, the sea scorpions continued to look at me. They almost seemed to gawk at me as I did the same to them. Suddenly, the all cleared and a much larger, older-looking one got up to the glass. My submersible had arms. Grabbers used to move away debris and rocks, minerals. It moved its shelled body to the arms, rubbing up against it, before lowering its head to show me a large parasite that had binded to it. I was confused as to what it was incentivizing, until finally I understood that it wanted me to remove the thing. The arms were not surgical, but fortunately, this parasite was big, meaning the arms could hopefully remove it. I knew it was risky, and if I accidentally killed it, I could be in massive trouble. However, somewhere deep within me, I knew it was desperate. So, as carefully as I could, I maneuvered the arms to reach the critter. It was very much like piloting a claw machine, with every movement a stressor on my psyche. Finally, I had a good grip on the parasite, with the other arm holding the elder sea scorpion's head steady, and with one good tug, the little shit came right off. The sea scorpion jolted, shaking its head in what I could only assume was pain. Yet, once the pain subsided, it looked happy, spinning in place with an upbeat pattern. It got back up to the window, and with a happy, almost animal-like bunt against Apollo, it descended back into the depths, with the rest of its family unit following it. With that experience over, I descended further, my mind straight and my heart beating with just a little more pride. I reported the encounter with my staff, who, when shown photos, absolutely thrilled. Fortunately, my supervisor was happy with me and green-lighted the further descent. The sonar continued to prove my suspicion, with the cave proving to be a worthwhile endeavor for the entire NOAA. Eventually, I reached the middle of the cave when the radar came back to life. Something was approaching the ship again, something absolutely gigantic. It must have been at least 60 feet in length. Now, I was someone who generally despised people who promoted the idea of megalodon living in the trench. However, seeing the radar blip with a massive white dot, you can't blame me for being scared shitless of whatever was approaching. I had already seen a literal living fossil, and I wasn't against the idea of a massive monster being down here anymore. However, my fears were calmed as I realized how slow it was moving. Hell, it might as well have been sitting still. I entered the intercom again to my supervisor, who told me to move towards it. Despite my fears, curiosity got the best of me, and I moved towards the blip. In the darkness, I couldn't see a damn thing, so I began to brace myself for a collision, just in case. But I never reached it, not before it let out a deep, loud, and inundating shockwave of noise. It sounded like a whale's call, but significantly louder and with more bass. My head wrung from the sound, my heart nearly exploding out of sheer terror and anxiety. Suddenly, the lights came face to face with the source of the noise. Thinking back on it now, humans really are tiny in comparison to some things. We are the apex predator, but we definitely aren't the top dogs in some areas. Size is definitely one of them. In front of Apollo was a gigantic fish, bony and large, Its head looked like it was made exclusively from bone, armored and rigid. The rest of its figure slowly came into view, its large body unveiling itself to the light. Another living fossil, a large, healthy, and majestic fish. Lead Sichthys. The behemoth paid me no mind, its gargantuan body regarding me with no more than what felt like a simple look. Of course, I began taking photos and sent them to my supervisor. The intercom shot to life again, and the ovation of my peers could be heard once more. Eventually, its large, scaly torso moved into the darkness, never to be seen again. I was given the green light to go further down, but I realized after 3 seconds of descent that I finally reached the bottom. It was different than the Challenger Deep. It was gray in color, with little to no sand on its surface. Jagged scars permeated from its surface, scattered across a variety of areas. What was interesting was that the bottom felt soft, almost like it was a cushion rather than rock. I began talking to my supervisor, discussing what the next move was. He wanted to explore the place further, to see if any other living fossils existed down here. I couldn't blame him. Everything we knew about the ocean and its inhabitants had been flipped on its head. It was amazing. As I began to move forward, something odd happened. The ground beneath me began to vibrate a bit. At first, I attributed it to shifting plates, but then, out of nowhere, the ground moved completely, nearly knocking over Apollo. Suddenly, the radar blipped a dot out, but it wasn't a dot at all. The white blip I would have usually seen encompassed almost the entire radar circle, as if the entire area around me was a living organism. I then did a sonar scan and saw what my mind had been trying to suppress ever since the radar did what it did. What could only be described as a leviathan was moving, and this movement was occurring right beneath me. What I had landed on wasn't ground. It was a living thing, and I had just woke it up. In my panic, I tried to turn on the intercom, but it wouldn't even go. The station I had been using to communicate with my team had been taken completely off the system. So I did the only other thing left. Get the hell out. I began piloting the submersible out of Dodge, moving it as fast as it could go. Suddenly, Apollo stopped completely. Her engine was on, but she wouldn't budge. I checked the sonar, and I wasn't stuck on anything. It simply wouldn't budge. The intercom then came on, but my supervisor's voice was replaced by a loud, yellowing, and deep voice. No, stay. I was completely frozen, my mind a jumble of fear, shock, and confusion. Was it talking to me? I slowly shot the intercom back on. Who are you? I stammered out, my voice a complete mess of sounds and obvious nervousness. The creature bellowed back, its voice calm, yet commanding. I am not a who. Even if I were, it does not matter. My mind began jumbling thoughts, many associated with how on earth this thing was speaking English, or for that matter, speaking at all. Why are you here? How did you find this place? I responded, truthfully. I am a marine explorer. A shift in Earth's sea crust opened up a hole beyond what we thought was the deepest point of Earth. I was tasked with going in. I couldn't see it, and thank God I couldn't. It probably would have given me a heart attack, but I could tell it was thinking of what to say. Are you here to harm or to heal? I was scared to answer, but I had helped that sea scorpion earlier. I thought that if what I believed was my life being on the line, telling this deep sea monster that I had helped it, would be useful. Earlier, I encountered some eurypterids. I helped this elder one with a parasite. It took my words and responded back, "Thank you." In the calming nature of its voice, I eased slightly, my mind gaining some clarity to ask it further questions. What is this place?" I asked. The creature didn't respond for a while, but after what felt like eons, it finally spoke up. "Many, many years ago, long before your species ever walked this planet, species of different eras managed to survive their respective calamities. The eurypterids, as you call them, were not suited for their new world. So, I called upon them to descend to this cavern, instilling them with an increased strength and tolerance for the conditions here. As time passed, more water-dwelling creatures came, and they now reside here. I am the guardian of this place, my purpose solely to defend and protect the nature here." I was at a loss of words. This thing, whatever it was inherently some sort of underwater deity. I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around the concept before it spoke through the intercom again. "You shouldn't be here." I snapped out of my thoughts, and upon hearing this, I became more confused than ever. I guess it could understand what I was thinking, because it fired up the intercom again. "You and your congregation are benevolent, but the rest of your kind is not. They pillage, loot, and destroy the ecosystem above. Many recent underwater creatures have come here, and they speak of you and your species' mayhem. I will seal this whole again, and you are to never return here. Do not tell any of your kind of my existence, and leave with the knowledge you have now, but no more." I understood. It was right, unfortunately. "I see," I muttered. The beast did not speak through the intercom this time, only making an incomprehensibly loud bellow that, if anywhere else, could have most likely took down a whole city through decibels alone. Before I began to comply and go ahead and ascend, one more question entered my mind. "How did you end up here?" The intercom stayed silent for the longest time, before it echoed to life for the last time of my journey. Some secrets are best left secrets. A part of me was slightly annoyed at this, but I understood. And so, I began my ascent. After resurfacing, my colleagues bombarded me with questions, demanding to know why I had basically gone off the grid. My supervisor was majorly pissed, but at the end of the day, none of it mattered. The next day, in the dead of night, I went back to my post on the station to see if the hole had closed, and sure enough, it did. I don't think I'll ever forget my experiences in the deep, and to be frank, who could? It was a jarring experience, and one that I think I'll never be able to truly comprehend. The media couldn't get it either, as the images of modern-day prehistoric monsters have swept through the internet like wildfire, with every site on the web talking about how interesting this truly is. If another crack forms or Earth cuts open again and we find another one of these, however, I will not go back, for I still don't know what it was, and I don't want to find out. The state of the city's transit is ridiculous. Why does Winnipeg Transit suck so much? Considering the huge ridership, how has the city not given it more funding? The delays are ridiculous sometimes. Like this is what my commute to work looked like this morning. I wake up, get ready for the day, and head out to the bus stop. I stand and wait, people watching, to kill time since I forgot to charge my headphones. The scheduled arrival time comes and goes. Google Maps says the bus departed. I say it's full of shit. I wait 20 minutes, then 30, then 40. I usually would have gone to another stop by this point, or seen if I have any friends going in my work direction I can carpool with. But something keeps me glued to the spot. Maybe I'm afraid I'll walk away just as it arrives. Maybe I know deep down that no one I know works in the same neighborhood as me and wouldn't be able to drive me. Maybe part of me hopes for an excuse to miss work. Either way, I don't budge. My eyes start getting heavy. I slept like crap last night. I blink. Something has changed. The buildings look different. Not to a significant degree, but enough that it is clear they have been repaired, renovated, even replaced. Construction of a new home has begun on a neighboring street, and the architectural style is one I have never seen before. The people are the same. Their fashion is familiar, but just a little out of place. Styles and color combinations I've never seen before. Materials that I don't recognize. I get some odd looks in the direction of my clothing, a snicker from a passing teenager. I look at my phone. The date is 10 years in the future, but the battery is still full. I turn on the camera. My body has traveled 10 years into the future, but it is not aged. The bus is still not here. I cannot risk missing it. I blink. More changes. In the distance, I see towering structures which look like sketches drawn by a designer who ignored everything they knew about construction and physics. The nearby area, however, is not so fantastical. Almost every building I saw previously is still here, but run down, dilapidated. Some have collapsed entirely, bits of their skeletal frames acting as grave markers. The people, somehow, have changed, even more drastically. The varied weights and degrees of exhaustion we all display have been replaced with a uniform, starved and hollow appearance. Their clothing is mostly rags, stamped with sigils that I have never seen before, but I somehow know to look away from as fast as possible. They look at me first in confusion, then with an uncomfortable degree of awe and fear. I am approached by someone who has one of the marks burned into their skin and the fire of a preacher in their eyes, as they speak a language I can scarcely understand. A few words ring familiar. Ancient, revelation, visitation, commandment, hope. As they gesture at the distant towers, their face contorts into a grimace of rage, but one tinged with resignation and hopelessness. They grab my shoulders and say one word I do know, slowly, as if reciting something they had memorized long before. Remember. I look at my phone. The date is over 200 years in the future, but the battery is still full. I turn on the camera. My body has traveled over 200 years into the future, but it is not aged. The bus is still not here. I cannot risk missing it. I blink. The decay has festered. Most structures have joined their fallen siblings, while those that remain are little more than ruins. There are no lights, save for that cast by the stars. The far-off spires have grown, twisting into painful shapes resembling the sigils I saw before. Several seem to shift out of the corner of my eye when I glance away, but look the same when I turn back. The moon appears to have spokes, and I somehow know these are the same as the growths on the horizon. There are no people, no screams of horror and fear echo down the road, no cries in the night, no bodies in the streets, only a terrible silence. Dust has gathered on every surface, with nothing disturbing it, save an occasional scrap of debris caught in the wind. Shadows move past, me with no visible caster, and no identifiable pattern to their forms. I see one resembling a circle with shifting, sinuous patterns of darker shades. Another like a large cat with humanoid heads whose mouths are open in a silent roar. And one which simply looks like a small, hunched child. If they are capable of perceiving me at all, they pay me no mind. I look at my phone. The date is over 1,000 years in the future, but the battery is still full. I turn on the camera. My body has traveled over 1,000 years into the future, but it has not aged. The bus is still not here. I cannot risk missing it. I blink. There is nothing left. Scorched earth surrounds me, the road having long eroded to earth and sand. The building frames have suffered a similar fate, with only my memories remaining. The spires still loom in the distance, but seem somehow diminished. Their shapes no longer cause me as much pain, and they no longer move when not observed, as if whatever intelligence animated them has left in search of more interesting toys. I look up. The sun is large, larger than I have ever seen it, and it feels as if it should be burning my skin. I turn my gaze. The moon is dead. It cannot be described any other way. The shadows are gone. Perhaps there are yet deeper levels, where shadows of those shadows linger on in places I cannot see. Regardless, I am alone, in a burnt and cracked landscape that stretches on forever. I look at my phone and see it somehow displaying a date billions of years into the future. When I hear the familiar pneumatic hiss, when I turn to its source, the bus is there. Its bright, undamaged exterior, incongruous in the dull hellscape. The doors are open, but I cannot see a driver or other passengers. I hesitate. What if this is an illusion, a trap meant to cut my long sojourn through time short, even if it is not, after all I have seen? Can I really re-enter a world full of life, when I have seen our eventual fate, our lives spent, and our planet ruined as a distraction for something beyond our comprehension? Can I pretend to care about the events of the present, when the future renders them all nil? The doors begin to close. I make my decision. Anyway, this all usually means I'm at least 10 to 15 minutes late for work every damn day. My boss is really getting on my case, but I don't get paid enough to afford a car. Not to mention the reduced weekend service sometimes means I'm waiting twice as long, which is so stupid. Not everyone gets weekends off. Is there anyone at Winnipeg City Hall I can talk to about this? Or a petition or something? This is utterly ridiculous. I think my child was swapped for something inhuman. My wife Jennifer died earlier this year. It feels like it happened yesterday. Not because of my memory of that day, but because I don't think I have truly lived a day since it happened. It's funny how much can change in a day. The morning had been like any other. Jennifer was feeding our newborn, Molly, and I was humming along to the ink spots as I made us a breakfast omelet. Life was perfect, yet as soon as Jennifer took a ponderous look at her hands and remarked how cold they were, it signified the end to my idyllic life. Hours later, I held one of those cold, lifeless hands as a doctor explained the spread and effect of sepsis. I learned a few hard lessons that day. I don't deal well with pity. I don't deal well with social gatherings. And I don't deal well financially. I hadn't realized how much I had relied on Jennifer for my well-being, every social occasion, felt suffocating, and I quickly realized my low salary as a data analyst was not enough to afford the mortgage payments for our suburban new build. When Jennifer's father threw a lifeline in offering use of his rarely used holiday home in northern Brittany, I gladly accepted. I couldn't wait to leave those pitying looks behind. It was only when me and Molly arrived at the house did I feel the first pang of apprehension. I knew the house was old, maybe 3 or 4 centuries by what Jennifer's father had said, but it looked almost medieval. The roof was sound but concaved like a lens. The chimneys at either side of the building seemed to be desperately clinging onto the main structure. These chimneys led to the only heating sources of the house, 2 grand fireplaces held aloft by large slabs of stone, which still bared the pickaxe marks from which it had been chiseled. The upper floor was supported by great beams of oak. Although still sturdy, they wore the scars of centuries of woodworm spots. Even after thorough cleaning, the creaky upstairs floorboards would still batter the lower floor with dust when walked upon. Yet, for its quirks, I felt almost content. The small village the house was situated in was incredibly quiet, meaning me and Molly were rarely disturbed. One might have guessed by the multitudes of shuttered windows that it was a ghost town, yet the spell would be broken by the hourly bells of the central church, which seemed to act an auditory timetable for the locals who would filter out of their homes to frequent the boulangerie or tabac in their daily rituals. In my brief visits out of the home, I noticed how aged the population was. I couldn't remember ever seeing anyone younger than their 30s. Not that I had much interaction with them. I couldn't even speak French, let alone Breton. And they always seemed to eye me with caution. Coincidentally, the only English-speaking person in the village was my neighbor, an old lady named Dorian, who looked almost as ancient as the building itself, lived in the house adjacent. Our first interaction had been odd. I'd just returned from the corner shop, Molly strapped to my front and shopping bag in hand, when as I put the keys in the door, I heard the clip-clop of wood on stone. I turned to face an old woman wearing clogs, donning a black and white modally dress with a frilly hat to match. Before I had a chance to greet her, she pointed a gnarled finger at Molly, and in a thick Breton accent croaked, "Is the baby yours?" "Yes, she is." "Her name is Molly," I replied cautiously. I didn't just find her now. I regretted my attempt at joke as Dorian's face furrowed into a stern glare. "This is no place for a child," she said coldly. "This house," I said, gesturing to the building. "It looks a bit shabby from the outside, but it's actually quite cozy on the inside," and Dorian cut me off by wagging her finger. No, this place is too dangerous for the child. We are too close to the chaos." For a moment I was confused as to what she meant, but then I realized she was referencing the valley that bordered the west side of the village. The Bretons use the word chaos to describe an area of literal primordial geological chaos. The chaos next to the village, like many others in Brittany, is a winding valley filled with immense boulders and strange formations. These great rocks, some being larger than houses, are said to have been tumbled and shifted into place after great calamities. The ancient nature of these valleys has spawned countless myths of spirits and creatures who have roamed these areas. Before the age of man, this mystique, however, had always been lost on me. I wouldn't worry. I don't think Molly here is going to be wandering near those rocks anytime soon, I said, stroking her head as she began to stir. Dorian only shook her head. Her mother should be watchful. It's not what wanders in that one should worry, but what wanders out? Before I could query what she meant, Molly began to cry. Her mother is not with us anymore, I said quickly, feeling a sudden pang of anguish. I better get in and feed this one. It was nice to meet you. We exchanged names and I made my way inside. As I unpacked my shopping and began mixing up some baby formula, I felt my grief creep back into my psyche. I had been in Brittany 3 months, and I realized I hadn't thought of Jennifer at all this last week. Being so busy with work and taking care of Molly, I realized I hadn't had much time to think. Now I was left alone with my thoughts. I remembered how greatly I missed her. The small things that were absent hurt the most. The way I would catch her in a jumping embrace when she returned from work. The smell of her on my pillows, and the way she would sing Molly asleep. These small things that together form the love for a person. Now, all I am left with is a memory. Molly's cries woke me from my mournful trance. It's okay, Daddy is here, I said softly as I lifted the bottle to her mouth for her to feed. What am I going to do, Molly? I whispered as her mother's green eyes peered into mine. I sighed and pulled her closer to me. At least I'll always have you. As if feeling my torment, Molly giggled and gave me one big toothless smile. I smiled back. Okay, you little rascal, time for bed. Daddy has some more work to do. I took Molly up to my bedroom, to her cot, which was nestled in the corner by the window. Sleep well, my little angel. I kissed her on the forehead and tucked her in. Downstairs in the sitting room, I kindled a fire, opened up my laptop, and returned to my work. I don't know how much time passed until I heard that first bump. I'd been wearing headphones, so I didn't know whether I had misheard at first, then another, and another. I shot to my feet as I heard Molly begin to wail. I heard what sounded like frantic footsteps echoing from upstairs. Molly, I shouted as I began bolting up the staircase and into the bedroom. I had expected something, anything but as I burst into the room, there was Molly, sound asleep in her cot. Had I imagined it? I stood in confusion as I felt a sudden breeze draft blow through the room. The window next to Molly's bed was slightly ajar. I was sure it hadn't been opened before. A low rumble of thunder emanated from the window. Rain began to patter quietly on the tiled roof. A strange tension filled me. I had never believed in ghosts, but this felt like something that a person who did believe in them would freak out about. Either way, whether it was a ghost or a rat, I suddenly felt very uncomfortable leaving Molly alone in that room. I carefully scooped Molly up from her cot and carried her back downstairs. She stirred as I entered the sitting room, and on sight of the baby milk bottle left on the side, she began incessantly reaching towards it. Still hungry, are we? I said to Molly as I laid her in the small crib by the sofa. Okay, just one more then. I hurried to the kitchen to create another mix. As I re-entered the sitting room, I could see her eyes were locked on the bottle with a strange intensity. Wow, you really like this stuff, huh? I reached down to feed her the bottle, but she practically snatched it away from me with the dexterity I'd never seen before, and began chugging the bottle down. Whoa, settle down there, sweetie. You'll get a bad tummy. I tried to pull the bottle away, but she had a vice-like grip on the bottle. In sheer disbelief, I watched as the entire bottle's contents disappear in 10 seconds. As soon as she finished, she let out a small burp and threw the bottle from her crib. Jesus Christ, Molly, where did that come from? I said in shock. I had never seen Molly act such a way, or any baby for a matter of fact. Molly's green eyes locked with mine. Another rumble of thunder permeated through the room. A wave of uncanniness washed over me. Something seemed off. Molly seemed off. I wasn't sure whether it was the strangeness of the evening that had got to me, but the way she looked at me so intently almost unnerved me, as if trying to make use of the sudden attention. Molly began mumbling her first word. Molly had never attempted speech like this before. My unease began dissipating as I realized I was about to bear witness to a wonderful moment. "What is it, Molly? Daddy is listening," I whispered, worrying any noise would pop this bubble of discovery. But, Molly mumbled, the words almost breaking free. "Yes, Molly," I said in anticipation. "More," Molly said with a certain deliberation. A laugh escaped my breath. "More. Molly, my angel, you have just had a whole bottle." Molly's brows furrowed as if understanding. "More," she repeated with a sterner tone. "No, Molly, it's past your bedtime already. You don't need another bottle," I said, the concern creeping back into my voice. "More. Now," Molly screamed as the first crack of lightning illuminated the room. She began flailing around manically in her crib. For a moment, I just sat there in disbelief. Molly was only 10 months old. It wasn't impossible for her to begin speaking at this age, but her comprehension of my words felt just as unnatural as her sudden appetite. Molly also had never had a tantrum like this before. Sure, she had cried and gotten upset, but she had never screamed bloody murder like this before. I conceded. I had tried to get her stopped by speaking to her, gently rocking her, even singing to her, but still she screamed, demanding to be fed. I felt defeated as began mixing her another bottle. Jennifer would have been able to remedy this, I thought to myself. But a rapping at the door broke me from my pitiful trance. It was Dorian, dressed in a white nightgown and fluffy slippers, which were slowly getting drenched by the intensifying rain, with a stony scowl plastered across her face, spoke to me while incessantly pointing her finger inside. "Your child has kept me up this last hour." "Oh God, Dorian, I'm sorry," I spluttered out. "It's Molly. I don't know what has gotten into her. She won't stop eating and cry." Dorian pushed past me before I could finish. "Where is she?" she demanded. "Let me have a look at her." She didn't have to ask. She simply followed the sound of the wailing. I quickly followed, baby bottle in hand. "She's never been this food manic before," I said, handing the bottle to Molly, which quickly silenced her screaming. "This has just begun tonight," Dorian said, concern beginning to show in her face. "Yes, and she even spoke her first words, only to ask for more food," I said as Molly began to polish off the last of the bottle. Dorian just shook her head. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," she began, then paused. Dorian took one look at Molly discarding her third bottle, and then looked up at me. "This is not your child," she said plainly. "What the hell are you talking about?" I said in astonishment. "Children are rare here. They are sought after, craved by things often not human." Dorian leaned down and picked up Molly, who had begun to cry again. This is Jeddan handiwork. I know many mothers who noticed too late or refused to accept. Months go by, food depletes, yet the baby has not grown. She looked down at Molly, who had begun to properly wail again. "She'll be deep within the chaos now. I did try to warn you." She sighed. A sudden anger had begun to well in me. That is my child you are holding. I don't know this Jedin, and I don't like how you refer to her. Give her back to me. I outstretched my arms expectantly. You don't believe me? Dorian chortled. Look, I'll show you. She suddenly began squeezing her thumb hard on Molly's temple. She began to scream even louder. I returned that scream and lunged towards her, but before I could reach her, I heard the audible pop of Molly's eye leaving her skull. Yet what dropped her to the floor wasn't flesh. It bounced and rolled to my feet like a marble. In a moment where time seemed to freeze, I picked it up. It was a perfect porcelain eye, carved and etched, better than any prosthetic I had ever seen. I looked up to see a single-eyed Molly, her skin coating the inside of her socket like some badly treated doll. My stomach rolled over inside of me. What the hell is that thing? Speaking aloud what I was thinking. A changeling. A very deceiving fake and a cruel imitation of life. Dorian began indifferently as Molly began to flail against her. They are the creation of Jedin, foul and imperfect creatures who have only prevented the degeneration of their race through claiming the beautiful and whole. My mind began to race. The madness of the situation and the screams of Molly, or rather the changeling, had starting to make my head throb. So, where is the real Molly? I asked desperately. They'll have taken her to the caves under the chaos, Dorian said calmly, as another lightning strike lit up her dark eyes. If you leave now, you might be able to get her before she's claimed. You'll need to bring this, she said, dangling the changeling in front of her. Even though I knew it wasn't human, my paternal instinct made me spring to grab the one-eyed baby and cradle it under my arm. What am I supposed to do with her? I asked, slightly unsettled by her handling of the child. You'll use her to bargain. They'll only reveal themselves to you that way. Your child will be of value to them, but not more than the tool they used to acquire her. These things require a lot to craft. She gestured to the door. Leave now. Go the deepest level of the chaos. If she's still alive, you'll hear her cries to guide your way. I hope you have more luck than I did. With so much information to process and so little time, all I could utter to her was thank you, as I grabbed my coat and ran out into the storm. It was raining hard. The changeling cried incessantly. Even with my knowledge, I instinctively tried to shield it from the rain the best I could. The lights flicked on in some of the houses I ran past as I held the screaming child, and as the street lights dissipated and the chaos unfolded in front of me, the only source of light would come from the inconsistent flashes of lightning that would illuminate the stone Goliaths I desperately clambered over. I was wading through the river of rock, less than 5 minutes before I heard the first cries, faint and whistled through the wind. I heard her, my baby girl. I quickened my pace, in complete disregard for the unknown drops. Nestled between boulders, I leapt from rock to rock, clutching the imposter closely to my chest. Then I found it, a circular clearing which at its center held 3 great boulders, fallen into place to give the appearance of a great stone doorway leading into a black, endless abyss. A single cry echoed from the void. Molly, I shouted, but only thunder answered my call. I wish I brought a flashlight or a lighter, anything that would have let me see into that dark cavern. I had no way of seeing how deep or far it went. I didn't want to risk a fall unless there was no other option. I had to try as Dorian said. I have your child, I called out to the abyss, and I know you have mine. No response. I want to trade. I return what is yours, and you return what is mine. I shouted. I could feel the desperation creeping into my voice. Again, I heard Molly's cries echo out from the dark. I laid the changeling out on the stone. Its porcelain eye glistened in the moonlight. I realized I had no other option. I grabbed a loose stone and raised it above my head. I'll kill it. I'll kill your creation if you don't bring me mine. I screamed in a sickening primal selfishness. I sickened me because I suddenly knew I would. If I couldn't have Molly, then they couldn't have this thing. A sudden guttural screech emanated from the darkness, an inhuman metallic scream that sounded like 100 forks being dragged across a chalkboard. I'll do it, you fucking bastards, I yelled. The screams and cries of Molly from the cave seemed to sync with the abomination below me. I'm going to give you till the count of 3, I said, my grip tightening on the rock. 1. Another hellish howl breaks from the dark. 2. The changeling looks up in a moment of terror. 3. A great crash of lightning strikes into a tree mere meters from where I was standing, blinding me with a light of sheer white for just a moment. As my vision clears, the rock still held aloft. I look down onto 2 green, beady eyes. Immediately cast the rock aside and scooped Molly up into my arms. I don't know how long I sat there, quietly sobbing and whispering sweet comforts into Molly's ears. But as the rain began to soak through my outer layers, I got up and made my way home. I don't remember getting home at all, nor going to bed. All I remember is waking up on my sofa and Molly cradled in my arms. There were a few dying embers left in the fireplace. I could see the morning sun creeping through the gaps of my window shutters. For a brief, comforting moment, I thought I had just experienced the most terrible of dreams. However, this spell was shortly broken, as when I glanced to my table, a single porcelain eye stared back at me. 6 months ago, I was taken hostage during a bus hijacking. I know you haven't heard of it. No one has, and I'm dead set on figuring out why. Sit the fuck down, he growled, lifting his pistol at the college-aged kid, firearm trembling in his skeletal hand. The rest of the captives, myself included, observed the exchange with bated breath. Before, we had just been passengers, a group of unconnected travelers, drifting over the rocky plains and the sand dunes of southwest Arizona, together, waiting patiently for the crammed bus to arrive at a mutual destination. 10 minutes after we departed, however, the lone hijacker stood up from the seat closest to the door and revealed his weapon. As he did, we found ourselves connected in the worst way possible. None of us understood why. I prayed that Kid's dumb courage could untangle our rapidly entwining fates, changing us back to simply a group of unconnected travelers before something terrible happened. Judging by the demographics of us captives, predominantly under the age of 10 or over the age of 50, he was the best shot we had. And so I watched, dread hanging heavy in my heart. Take it easy, man. There are children on board. You see that, right? You gotta put the gun down. The hijacker said nothing in response. Instead, he coldly shook his head. No, leaning his shoulder against a steel pole directly behind the driver for support. In his right hand, he held a silver 9mm pistol. In the other, he held something I had trouble identifying. A noisy green box about the size of a matchbook. It ticked like a metronome, beeping rhythmically in his palm every few seconds. 2 tubes containing a slightly cloudy, colorless liquid ran from the side of the box over his wrist and up into the darkness of the man's sleeve. I incorrectly assumed it was a bomb. turn right at the fork. Then, in 6 miles, turn left. A muffled robotic voice cooed from within his jacket pocket. He briefly took his eyes off the kid, tilting his head around to say something to the driver. Then, that lion-hearted son of a bitch started sprinting down the aisle. I understand why he believed he could overwhelm the hijacker. Visually, it sort of made sense. Their physiques couldn't have been more opposite. The kid was in his prime, muscular but not so muscular that the weight slowed him down, a youthful fire behind his eyes. He progressed towards his target with a certain predatory grace, like a jaguar prowling in the shade of the underbrush, closing in on injured prey. The hijacker, in comparison, looked to be on death's door. He had a pair of dull blue eyes sunken deep in their sockets, brittle patches of brown hair asymmetrically planted across his scalp, with islands of wilted skin peeking through where the flesh was most barren. The man was downright cadaverous, inhumanly emaciated. Couldn't have been over 90 pounds, soaking wet, and that's including the weight of his oversized denim jacket and dark black chinos. He was like a stick figure that had been granted life through a child's dying wish, jumping off the page into a world too harsh for his pencil-drawn proportions, composed of nothing more than a torso with sewing needle arms held up by a pair of toothpick legs and a shriveled head dangling on top of it all. The only advantage the hijacker had was the gun. Even so, it appeared like he was struggling to hold the pistol upright. His hand barely had the strength. I suppose the odds felt even. In the blink of an eye, the kid had closed the distance. He was quick, swift, but powerful. Maybe he ran cross-country. The hijacker barely had time to react. Hope dug its roots into my chest. I felt my body reflexively rise from my seat. I was only 3 rows behind the driver. The kid will probably need help wrestling the gun away from him, I thought. Before I could even get into the aisle, though, something went wrong. Impossibly wrong. He angled his approach so that his chest collided with the hijacker's back. I guess he aimed to thread his brawny arms through the man's armpits, thereby immobilizing him and controlling the direction the firearm was pointed at, to some degree. But as soon as he connected with the hijacker's body, it liquefied, along with the gun, the ticking box, and his clothes. I know how it sounds, and it's okay. You're allowed to harbor some skepticism. Bear with me and try to keep an open mind. So, he melted. His skin tone bled together with the colors of his clothes, pallid beige swirling together with navy and black, homogenizing into earth-colored gelatin that crawled over the kid's frame. It practically glided, creeped over his shoulders, between his legs, around his torso until it was all behind him. Made it look easy. Then he reformed, decongealed back into a person, reintegrated the clothes, the box, and the gun too. The hijacker placed the butt of the gun on the small of the kid's back, angled it slightly upward, and pulled the trigger. 3 explosions, a crack of thunder in triplicate, sprays of blood and bone, screams from the passengers, the high-pitched shrieks of children, and the more sonorous wails of their parents. And behind it all, I could still hear the ticking of that tiny box, slightly faster, but otherwise unbothered by its dissolution and reformation. I couldn't look away, even as that kid fell into a heap, mangled body crumpling to the floor beside the driver. I couldn't blink. The man swung around, panting and sweating, like a Great Dane in the summer sun. Tears had welled under his eyes. His gaze darted between the kid's corpse the hysterical passengers, and back again. For a moment, his features betrayed remorse, but that moment didn't last. His ragged breathing slowed, his face hardened. He straightened himself and somehow he looked taller. It wasn't by a lot, a few inches maybe, but it was noticeable. Like his reintegration hadn't been precise, just very approximate. He pointed the gun at the crowd and formally introduced himself. My name is Apollo. Where I need to go isn't more than an hour down the road. When we get close, I'll allow one of you to phone the police. The green box began ticking slightly faster. From every few seconds to every other second, the sound reminded me of a submarine's radar, detecting a rapidly approaching torpedo. Most of you will live as long as you do as I say. I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Some of you are probably asking yourselves, is this real? When did this happen? Why haven't I heard about it already? To start, the event I'm describing occurred a little over 6 months ago. As for why you've never heard about it, well, that part I'm still figuring out. Because if nobody's heard about it, there wasn't any news coverage. To my complete and utter shock, not a single outlet reported on a cryptic bus hijacking, orchestrated by an unhinged individual that included the death of a male, white, college-aged kid who was killed attempting to be a hero. Hate to sound cynical about the state of American media, but I don't know any news director that wouldn't look at the story the same way they'd look at a juicy T-bone steak or scantily clad reality TV star. They're positively ravenous for this type of thing. I would know. I used to be a journalist, a damn good one too, until I was blacklisted from the industry for trying to publish an op-ed on the experience. But hey, who needs conventional media outlets anymore? We live in the age of the internet. Apollo spent the next handful of minutes reorganizing us. Men to the front of the bus, women and children to the back. At the outset, it wasn't clear which category was safer to be in. Not looking to be gunned down like the kid, we didn't ask questions. We just all complied with his request, urgently shuffled past each other like strangers in an airport. Once he had 5 rows of men sequestered up front, Apollo began inspecting them, looked each one of them up and down with those sunken eyes. All the while, the bus was silent, save for the revving of the engine and the green box ticking its impatient melody. Suddenly, the ticking accelerated. Apollo's eyes widened. He began hyperventilating. Hungry fear bloomed somewhere within him. His focus shifted to the road behind us. From his position at the front of the bus, he tilted his head side to side, gaze fixed on a window at the very back of the vehicle, turned around in my seat, looked out the same window, and squinted. But there was nothing. Initially, I thought he could see the cops in the distance or something, even though we hadn't been allowed to call them yet. Not a single car was behind us, just the desert at twilight, brake lights intermittently revealing the shrubs and cacti lining the backwoods road we were barreling down. Wherever Apollo's GPS was taking us, it felt far off the beaten path. He seemed paralyzed, locked in a state of utter panic as the ticking continued its manic song. "Stop the bus," he whispered. The driver, an elderly man in a reflective vest and button-up shirt, did not hear the command. "Stop the bus," Apollo roared. Tires screeched. I hadn't braced for impact, so the side of neck collided awkwardly with the seat in front of me. A toddler a few rows back began sobbing uncontrollably. He had been exceptionally stoic until that point, but the sudden stop had demolished the floodgates. and once the tears started following, they didn't show signs of drying up anytime soon. The hijacker's eyes scanned the captives in front of him. Eventually, they landed on a lean man in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair. "You," he declared, using the butt of the pistol to indicate who he had selected. "Stand up, now." Reluctantly, the man got to his feet. A jumbled appeal for mercy streamed from his lips. "Okay. Hey, listen. I have two daughters. One of them is very sick, and..." Apollo wasn't listening. His head was down, attention glued to the ticking box. It was hard to tell for certain what exactly he was doing. A murky darkness had fallen inside the bus after sunset. His hands appeared to be fidgeting with the device. Best I could say, I think he loosened one of the tubes containing the cloudy fluid, dabbed some of it onto his finger, and then wiped it onto the salt and pepper man's forehead. A profane baptism. The cryptic rite only made the captive bleed more feverishly. Please, get out," Apollo responded firmly. The captive tilted his head. His whole body trembled as he just kept repeating the word, "What?" over and over again. Nuclear levels of confusion seemed to have completely atomized his brain. I almost expected to see a gray-pink brain soup drip from his ears and onto his cheeks. "Driver, open the door. Let this man out." The door creaked open. Hesitantly, the man moved to the aisle. He sheepishly raised his cell phone for Apollo to see. Words had left him at that point, but he still wanted permission to leave with the technology. The ticking intensified. The beeps had become so fast that they almost melded into a single ear-piercing sound. Apollo's face tightened from some mix of fury and fear. Yes, take it. I don't care. Now get the fuck off the bus." The man finally seized his opportunity. He raced down the aisle and off the vehicle, tripping over the kid's corpse in his hurry, nearly falling on top of him as he made his escape. As soon as the doors snapped shut, Apollo shouted his next command. "Drive." The bus gathered speed. The stunned man disappeared into the blackness, and the sing-songy GPS chirped from Apollo's jacket pocket. "Continue straight for another 32 miles. The ticking slowed, and Apollo seemed to calm. "Your destination will be on your left." Apollo expelled 4 more captives that night. Every time, it was the same. The ticking would speed up. A man would be selected, baptized, and then dismissed. Once they had been left behind, swallowed by the night, the ticking would settle. It took some detective work, but I've determined approximately which road we were driving down. Honestly, it wasn't as remote as I thought. The nearest town was, give or take, an hour's walk from where most of them had been dropped off. 5 calls were made to the police reporting the hijacking. You want to hazard a guess on how many of them were found? 0, zilch, goose egg. All of them vanished without a trace. I could understand 1 or 2 of them becoming lost to the wilderness, killed by a rattlesnake, or by dehydration, or heat stroke. The desert isn't exactly the most hospitable piece of Mother Gaia. But all of them, what are the odds? Not only that, but none of their remains have ever been located. Not a single scrap of any of them. To say that fact irked me in the weeks that followed would be an understatement. It drove my mind out to the edge of sanity and kicked it from the car. Not unlike Apollo did to those men. Left it to fester in that wasteland without a lifeline. That said, over time, I finally started to visualize a perverse logic to it all. Hear me out. The men Apollo selected were tall and gaunt, older. Most of them had brown hair and blue eyes. They all sort of looked like him. Originally, I theorized he hijacked the vehicle because he needed help getting to wherever that GPS was leading us. But then, why hijack a whole bus full of people? Why not just hijack a taxi? Better yet, why not just call an Uber? Those options sure would have been simpler. Unless, perhaps, he was being chased by something, and he was attempting to slow down its pursuit by throwing a few look-alikes in its way. You want to know what I think that mysterious liquid was? Cerebrospinal fluid, flowing from his spine to the device, and then back again. The baptism provided a little part of himself to elevate the authenticity of his doppelgangers, which brings me to the most important question, one I still don't have a satisfactory answer to. What was that device, and why was it ticking? Show yourself, Apollo screamed. The green box was ticking faster than it ever had before, like a snare drum tapping at 400 beats per minute. He waved the gun around wildly at the frightened passengers. Please, I'm so close. I just need a little more. I can feel it. Why stand in the way of my ascension? He was whimpering, nearly crying again. Eventually, his eyes landed on a young mother sitting aside her son and daughter in the back of the bus. Apollo charged at her with an imperceptible speed, dropping the ticking box from his left hand so he could pull her from the seat. It swung a few inches above the aisle like a clock pendulum as he put the pistol to her head. Why are you doing this? Haven't I done enough? Haven't I proven myself worthy? His interrogation yielded no answers. It only served to rattle the poor woman to the point of absolute malfunction. Mostly what she said was unintelligible. Her sobs were unrelenting. The syllables had been drowned in a river of tears and mucus before they even had a chance to exit her mouth. However, there was one thing she said that sticks out in my mind. I can hear the words as clear as day. Please spare me and my son. Every time she repeated the phrase, I became more and more aware of the subtle discordance within. Why wasn't she mentioning her daughter? That realization had power. Something about it pulled back a veil that was obscuring the presence of an inhuman entity. Subconsciously, I had already peeked behind it, noticing her daughter in that seat at all. Now, though, it was fully open, and when I saw her, or I guess it saw me back. The child was crawling up the side of the bus like a tarantula. It skittered across the roof until it was directly above Apollo. All the while, it wasn't watching where it was going. Its pure white eyes were fixed squarely on my own. No one else seemed to notice it. It smiled and slowly pushed a finger to its lips, as if to shush me. My heart exploded against my ribs. I shook my head. No. Somehow I knew what was coming. Despite everything, I wanted it to give Apollo mercy, an emotion I still don't completely understand. But he was apparently too far gone. His sins were too irredeemable, his transgressions too foul, and his punishment was swift. Its arm grew like stretched taffy until it connected with the base of Apollo's skull. His head shot up. He clearly felt it. The ticking continued, faster and faster and faster. Alethea, I'm begging you. Too little, too late. Its fingers dug into Apollo's skin. A muffled scream and a series of gurgles radiated from his slacked jaw. A symphony of tearing flesh spread through the air, popping bone intermixed with ripping muscle and trickling blood. Eventually, the entity wrenched two separate tubes from the hijacker's body. One small, one large. The small tube was the plastic one that had been carrying the cloudy fluid. The large tube was Apollo's throat. It released its grasp, and his corpse slumped to the floor. His skin lost all color, adopting a deep gray tone like uncooked shrimp. Apollo's features dissolved too. No eyes, no face, no mouth, no hair. He became a mound of unidentifiable human body. Then, the entity receded from view, fled into the background like a chameleon changing colors. Before it completely disappeared, however, it winked at me, and I can't stop replaying that moment in my head. With Apollo dead, everyone rushed off the bus, weeping and broken. I almost followed them. Almost. Call it a hunch. But I knew I needed to look. Terror swimming through my gut. I stepped out of my seat and tiptoed over to Apollo's corpse, reached into his jacket pocket, and pulled out his cell phone. We had been only 2 miles from whatever his destination was. I committed the address to memory, slipped the phone back in his pocket, and raced off the bus. Whatever the truth is, I know I can find it at that address, which is why I've infiltrated the cult that owns that land. Technology is prohibited on their reserve, so I'm not afraid of them finding my post. But I don't have anyone to say goodbye to, so I made this instead. It's pathetic, I'm aware. Do me a favor, though. If I don't make it back, please disseminate this story and the following words as far as you can. Apollo, Aletheia. The audience to his red nativity. There's something horrific looming on the horizon. I don't know if I'm the right person to bring it all to light, but hell, I'm going to try. There's a woman who lives inside the walls of my gallery. For 15 years, she's been knocking against the marble, attempting to deliver a message I couldn't decipher. Until last night, now I understand. I've always felt profoundly relieved to put that burning city behind me, move past the death and destruction, divide myself from the ash and the ruins, the rust-colored clouds and the blood-orange sky. Out of sight, out of mind, towering steel doors swung shut as I stepped into the gallery. I sighed, allowing my shoulders to sag as I slowly twisted my neck. Left to right to left, the AC hummed, and its crisp, mechanical breath crawled over my exposed skin. My body cooled. The muscles in my neck began to unwind. This was my sanctuary, the last building standing, a great marble raft drifting above an ocean of rubble. I couldn't let myself completely relax, though. Yes, the gallery was safer than the inferno outside its walls. Much safer. But it came with its own risks. Because it wasn't just my sanctuary. I shared the refuge with one other person. Unlike me, she never seemed to leave. She usually wasn't visible when I entered, but she was always there. If I couldn't see her, that meant she was in the walls. If she was in the walls, she'd be knocking her forehead against the marble. She didn't have any knuckles, so the woman made her skull an instrument. Same pattern every time, measured and deliberate. Tap, pause. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, tap. The knocks were gentle, but the sound carried generously through the cavernous studio floor. It was a single box-shaped room with 30-foot-tall ceilings and not a lot in between. Each wall held a few paintings from artists of no renown. There was a spiral staircase in the center, but the 68 metal steps led to nowhere, abruptly stopping 2/3 of the way up. And most cryptically, there was the elevator, directly across from the entrance. No buttons to call the damn thing. The outline of a down arrow above the doors I'd never seen flash. No one ever came out, and I knew no one ever would either. The elevator was a one-way trip, constructed for me alone. Wasn't ever sure how I knew that fact, but I'd bet my life on its truthfulness 20 times over. So, there I'd be, by myself on the gallery floor, that snake of a woman slithering through its walls, surrounded by an empty, burning city for miles in every direction. It would always start with me approaching the massive steel doors, waves of heat galloping over my back. But when it would end was variable. It could take minutes, it could take hours. On rare occasions, it could take days or weeks. Eventually, though, I'd wake up, the same inscrutable dream every night without fail for over 15 years. A transmission from the depths of a hollow reality that I never understood until last night. Tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. My birth. Ever since I can remember, I felt out of place, an outsider among my own species. I'm sure a lot of people experience a similar pariahhood, and I obviously can't confirm my lived experience is distinct or extraordinary in comparison. Let me provide an example, some objective proof of my otherness. As soon as I drew a first breath, my mother's heart stopped. Spontaneous cardiac arrest, no rhyme or reason. An unceremonious end, like the death of an old car battery. The medical team leapt into action. A few doses of IV adrenaline later, the muscle wearily returned to duty. But the moment her heart restarted, mine then stopped. Then they'd resuscitate me, only to have my mother die again. So on and so on. The way my dad used to tell it, the doctors became incrementally more unnerved and bewildered each time we flipped. Life was a zero-sum game in that operating room. It was either me or her, and there was nothing they could do to change that. An unshakable declaration from God, or the Reaper, or whatever unknowable divinity would be in charge of such an edict. The uncanny tug-of-war would have probably been amusing to witness if the implications weren't so deeply tragic. 3 or 4 cycles later, my mother's heart gave out completely, obstinately refused to beat no matter what the medical team did. Dad would sometimes theorize that was an active decision made by the doctors that handled her care, even if they didn't have the balls to admit it. Like once they realized that one of us was dying, they arbitrarily awarded me with life, started covertly injecting saline into my mother's veins instead of adrenaline or something. I doubt that last part actually happened. The circumstances were just viciously unfair, and that type of thing is fertile soil for growing conspiracy. Regardless, I felt his pain. See, that's the rub. Although I've always felt like an outsider, that doesn't mean I've lacked empathy. I have reverence for the people around me. I've just never felt connected to any of them. I'm like a naturalist living alone in the jungle. I love the flora and the fauna. I respect the miracle that nature represents. But at the end of the day, I'm still alone, which brings me to Anthony. My childhood, I experienced a fair amount of bullying as a kid, probably became a target on account of my quiet nature and my social isolation. A lone gazelle straying too far from the safety of the herd. They didn't scare me much, though. I just couldn't see them as predators, more like flies buzzing around my head. Noisy and a smidge irritating, but ultimately harmless. That was the problem. They wanted to feel like predators, and I wasn't providing the sensation. Inciting fear and misery made them feel in control. So, when they couldn't get a rise out of me with their routine arsenal of schoolyard mockery, things escalated. And every time a new prank was enacted, a carton of milk spilled over my head, a few spiders dumped into my backpack, etc., I would notice Anthony watching from the sidelines, livid on my behalf. Tall for his age, frizzy black hair, blue eyes boiling over with anger behind a pair of thick square glasses. One afternoon, Austin, a dumber and more violent breed of bully, became fed up with my relative disinterest, decided to take the torment up a notch. He snuck up behind me while I was eating lunch, stuck a meaty fist into my bun, and yanked a thick chunk of hair from my scalp. That was certainly my line in the sand. It was Anthony's too, apparently. I spun around. Before he could even gloat, I lunged forward, opened my jaw, and bit down hard on his nearest elbow. At the same time, Anthony had been running up behind him with a metal lunch tray arched over his shoulder. The shiny rectangle connected to Austin's temple with a loud clatter, almost like the ringing of a gong. It was a real one-two punch. An hour later, Anthony and I had our first conversation outside the principal's office, both waiting to be interrogated. I've never been quite comfortable with the way he looked at me, even back then. His grin was too wide, his focus too intense. On the surface, it was an affectionate expression, but there was something dark looming behind it all. A possessiveness, a smoldering infatuation that bordered on obsession. I tried to ignore it because I genuinely did like him. As a friend, he was the only one I felt comfortable confiding in. The only person who knew of the gallery and the burning city other than myself. Now there's no one else. This post is designed to fix that. The gallery. I'd conquers the Tarandos was my favorite. The first word is pronounced E-Day, I think. It wasn't the largest painting in the gallery, nor was it the most technically impressive. There was just something bewitching about the piece, though. I found myself hopelessly magnetized to it for hours every night. 1 foot long, about half a foot tall, with a frame composed of small alternating suns and moons, carved into the wood. It depicted a single-armed Valkyrie with white wings and dull gray armor, lying on her back under the shade of a willow tree. A creature with the body of a man and the head of a stag is descending on her. Its face is contorted into a vicious snarl, arms outstretched with violent intent. The beast seems unaware of the serrated dagger in the Valkyrie's singular hand, tenting the skin on the right side of its neck, about to draw blood. Oil paint lended the scene a striking vibrancy. The grass appeared lush, almost palpable. The hair on the beast's knuckles looked matted and dense, like it was overflowing with grease. Studying that canvas made me feel alive, more than I've ever felt in the waking world, honestly. However, that invigoration would fade into unease the moment my eyes landed on the 2 black holes above the Valkyrie's head, because they weren't some bizarre artistic choice. They were holes, literally. Every painting in the gallery had a pair of them. She liked to watch me look at the paintings every so often, When she did, two bloodshot eyes would intensely monitor my gaze. Sometimes she'd watch for so long, without blinking, that tears would drip down the length of the piece. Eventually, the frame would tremble with her message. Tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. My adolescence. What's the holdup then? Just do it already, 17-year-old me proclaimed, unafraid and defiant. The man in the ski mask tilted his head. His glare dissipated. I stepped closer. The employee behind the counter stopped pulling bills from the register, eyes wide with disbelief. Quinn, what the fuck are you doing? Anthony hissed, cowering behind a nearby rack of chips. I sniffed the air, ran my fingers along the countertop while licking my lips, surveyed my surroundings by turning my head, and perked my ears for unusual sounds. Smell, touch, taste, sight, hearing. I resampled them all. Everything was as it should be. I felt my confidence balloon further. I'll do it, bitch. I'll shoot. I ain't afraid. I'll splatter your guts across the fucking floor. The would-be criminal stuttered. I stepped even closer, close enough that the barrel of his pistol began digging into my chest. Yeah, I heard you the first time, man. I smiled, baring my teeth. So, do it then. Look, I'm making it easy for you. Don't even have to aim. Like the flick of a switch, his demeanor changed. The gunman's bravado collapsed in on itself, falling apart like paper mache in the rain. Without saying another word, he sprinted from that CVS and disappeared into the night. I flipped around so I could face Anthony, closed my eyes and took an exaggerated bow. He wasn't applauding. Neither was the flabbergasted kid behind the cash register, for that matter. But I sure as shit pretended they were. I was damn proud of my little parlor trick. Later that night, though, I'd ruined the magic. Anthony was insistent. Just wouldn't let it go. He wore me down. So I told him that I didn't experience any synesthesia. That meant we were safe. No one in that convenience store was going to die. My performance was just a logical extrapolation of that arcane knowledge. No one was going to die relatively soon, anyway. My first dream of the burning city and the gallery came the night of my 11th birthday. My ability to sense approaching death came soon after. Synesthesia, for those of you unaware, is a neurological condition where the stimulation of one sense becomes involuntarily translated into the language of another sense. But that probably sounds like a bunch of medical blather, so let me provide you with a few examples. The man tasted loud. The apple felt bright. The musical note sounded purple. You get the idea. It's like nerves getting their wires crossed. For a whole year before his death, my grandfather looked salty. His apartment smelled quiet. His voice sounded circular. And all of those queer sensations only became more intense as his expiration date approached. I eventually picked up on the pattern. Once I grasped the bounds of my extrasensory insight, death lost its hold over me. You see, death draws a lot of its power from anticipation. People don't like surprises, especially shitty ones. Nobody wants to be startled by the proverbial monster under the bed. I, however, had become liberated. I could feel death's advance from miles away. Therefore, I had nothing to fear, nothing at all. At least, that's what I used to believe when I was young and dumb. Unfortunately, there are two major flaws in my supposed invulnerability. that I completely swept under the rug. You may be shouting them at your computer screen already. Just because I could sense death didn't mean I was shielded from the tragedies of life. I didn't know for certain that I could sense everyone's death. There's one person in particular who would be unverifiable by definition. How could I be sure that I was capable of sensing my own death coming if I had never died before? The gallery. The night of my 12th birthday, she revealed herself. She finally came out. There was a crack aside the elevator, no larger than the size of a volleyball. It was impossible to see what lay beyond that crack. Its darkness was impenetrable. The woman wriggled out of that darkness and slithered towards me. She had somehow been reduced to just a head with a spinal cord lagging behind it, acting as her tail. Her movements were distinctly reptilian, rows of vertebrae swinging side to side, creating U-shaped waves of rattling bones as she glided across the marble floor. I couldn't see her face until she was only a few feet away. Long, unkempt strands of gray hair obscured her features, wreathing them behind a layer of silver filaments, like the blinds on a window. There was a crater at the center of her forehead. A quarter-sized circle of her skull had been completely pulverized from the incessant knocking. She twirled around my leg, spiraling up my torso, until she was high enough to drape her spinal cord over my shoulders. Then, we were face to face, and she spoke the only 8 words I've ever heard spill from her withered lips until last night. "Are you ready to see what is below?" I shook my head. She looked disappointed. Then, I woke up. 365 days later, she'd wriggle out from the crack again to ask me the same question. Year after year after year. My early 20s. In order for you to understand what transpired over the last 24 hours, I need to explain me and Anthony's falling out. The summer before I went away to college, he arrived at my doorstep and professed that he was in love with me, had been for a long time apparently. His speech laid out all the gory details, how he believed we were soulmates, how perfect our children were going to be, how honored he was to get to die by my side. Note the language. It wasn't that he believed we could be soulmates, or that our children could be perfect. No, that phrasing was much too indefinite. From his perspective, our future was already sealed, written in the stars whether I liked it or not. I tried to ease him back to reality, gently, reiterated the same talking points I'd harped on since he hit puberty. Romantic love wasn't in the cards for me. I was incapable of experiencing that level of connection with anyone. It had nothing to do with the value of him as a person or as a potential mate. My rejection wasn't a judgment. He wouldn't hear it. Instead, he accused me of being a stuck-up bitch through bouts of rage-tinted sobs. I was going to college and he was staying in our hometown to take a job at his father's factory. That must be it, he realized out loud. I didn't feel like he was good enough for me. He lacked prestige. I think I responded to those accusations with something along the lines of, "Listen, Anthony, I don't think I'm better than you. It's not like that at all. We're just different. Fundamentally different. I'm sorry, but that's never going to change either. Not for you, and not for anyone else." In retrospect, maybe I could have selected cleaner verbiage. In the heat of the moment, I don't think he took the words as I intended. From there, Anthony hurled a chair through my house's living room window, stomped out the front door, and exited my life for a little over 5 years. Current day fast. Forward to last week. I returned to my hometown from my apartment in the city due to the death of my father. something I began feeling inklings of 2 years ahead of time. After the funeral, I focused on getting his estate in order, only venturing down onto Main Street once in the 7 days I've been here. The coffee machine broke, and I was in dire straits. And who do I just so happen to run into? Anthony. Honestly, I barely recognized him. He was no longer sporting a lanky frame, frizzy black hair, and thick bottle-cap glasses. His body was muscular, almost Herculean. He slicked his hair back, varnishing it with some hideously pungent, over-the-counter male beauty product. He no longer wore glasses now that he was able to afford a LASIK procedure. Cured his short-sightedness for good. I couldn't detect the same darkness behind his eyes anymore. But that wasn't because something purged it from his system. He'd just gotten more proficient at hiding it. Last night we went out for dinner and a drink, platonically. I made that exceptionally transparent from the get-go. He teased me in response, inquiring whether my boyfriend in the city would come, kick the shit out of him if he heard I was out with an old flame. For what felt like the millionth time, I explained to Anthony that I wasn't interested in that type of connection. Thus, I was single. That made him smile. Inevitably, he invited me back to his apartment. He was very proud of his lucrative new position in his company and the luxuries that came with it, and he wanted to show off. Almost reminded him that it wasn't his company, it was his father's company. To avoid conflict, I held my tongue. It might sound insane that I agreed to his invitation. Like I said, he concealed his darkness well. Anthony may have grown up to be a bit of a tool, but he was still the only person I ever felt close with. I was genuinely interested in seeing how his life had turned out. I wasn't experiencing any synesthesia around him either. To me, that indicated relative safety. No one was going to die. If he tried something lecherous, an act of depravity, that may not necessarily inflict death. Well, that's what pepper spray is for. Anthony lived in a 2-story brick row home on the outskirts of town. I walked in the door and was greeted by a tiny entrance nook, followed by an extensive set of stairs, which led up to his ostentatious foyer/entertainment room. I won't lie, it was impressive. That was the point, I think. His home was just a big, glossy distraction, something to keep your attention away from the bedeviled man who lurked within. Barely even noticed him tapping on some home security dashboard to the right of the front door. I do remember hearing the heavy click of a motorized lock, though. At that point, I was already walking up the stairs. For the next hour, we sat across from each on a massive leather sectional in his foyer, chit-chatting over an additional glass of wine. Eventually, though, enough was enough. I think he sensed I was preparing to excuse myself and go home, because he leaned over, grabbed one of 5 stout candles off of the coffee table, and began lighting the wick with a box of matches he pulled from his blazer pocket. I told Anthony it was getting late, and that it was time for me to leave. He didn't say anything. He didn't react to the sentence at all. He just kept silently lighting the candles. When I witnessed the reflection of the burning wick in his eyes, I realized I had made a mistake. Fine, I thought. I don't need his permission to leave. He didn't say anything as I darted past him, jogging down the stairs. I pulled the knob to the front door. It didn't budge. There wasn't any obvious way to unlock it either. Anthony, can you kindly help me unlock the front door? I called up, experiencing terror for the first time in years. A voracious chill eating its way through my chest. Nothing. No response. Not a beat. Instead, the lights clicked off. Felt a lump grow in the back of my throat. Sweat poured over my temples. I perked my ears. No footfalls. No sound. No synesthesias. Just darkness oozing down that silent corridor. A lurching tidal wave of black tar, moments away from swallowing me whole. I reached into my purse for my cell phone. Then, furious movement down the stairs. The sound of heavy boots stomping on hardwood filled my ears. Before I could react, he was looming over me. An open hand exploded out from the shadows and hooked onto my blouse collar. With one forceful pull, he yanked me to the ground. The bridge of my nose crashed into the edge of a stair as I fell. Electric pain writhed and crackled over my sinuses. My mouth felt hot and boggy as he lugged me back up to the foyer. Anthony quickly pinned me to the floor in front of the coffee table. I thrashed and struggled, but it wasn't much use. He had positioned one muscular knee on each of my elbows. I was trapped. Without uttering a word, he wrapped his meaty claws around my neck and squeezed. The veins in his head pulsed, his face swollen with fury. I started to see double. Consciousness liquefied and slipped through my fingertips. I closed my eyes. With the last few grains of life I had left, I thought of my favorite painting. Heidi Conquers the Tarandos. I wanted to die, with its beauty graffiti on the inside my skull. Unexpectedly, there was the tearing of flesh and a soggy gurgle, followed by a few sputtering coughs. Anthony's hands released. Oxygen rushed into my starved lungs. I opened my eyes. A serrated dagger had been plunged into the soft flesh of his neck, skewering it completely. I saw a bit of the blade poking through on the other side. Dewdrops of blood and plasma seeped from the fatal wound, trickling over his collarbone and dripping onto my blouse. The scent of iron quickly coated the interior of my broken nose. A hand still tightly gripped the dagger's handle, but Anthony's heavy knees had never left my elbows. It wasn't mine, but it came from me. I traced the ethereal limb from the knife to the center of my ribcage, where it had sprouted, and as swiftly as it appeared, the limb and dagger vanished. Before Anthony collapsed on top of me, I used my freed hands to push him off and to the side. He fell, hitting the coffee table as he tumbled. The resulting collision sent 5 burning candles crashing onto a large cotton blanket nearby. His foyer became a bonfire. I stood up, still weak and woozy from the prolonged suffocation. The sofa had caught flame too. Harsh black smoke began to diffuse throughout the apartment. I raced down the stairs once again, but I reached a similar impasse. The door remained mechanically locked. I screamed, cried out for someone to hear me, twisted the knob so hard that it tore the skin on my right palm. All the while, a conflagration bloomed behind me. I shifted my attention to the digital security dashboard aside the door. I pushed my fingers against the keyboard. The device whirred to life. 4 asterisks stood in my way. A PIN number was required to get to the home screen. I tried my birthday. 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the year. Incorrect. A warning on the screen read 2 attempts left. I tried Anthony's birthday. Nothing. 1 attempt left. My panic intensified, reaching a fever pitch in tandem with the ravenous flames 1 floor above. Then I heard it. At least, I think I heard it. Maybe my mind just clicked into place, and the realization was so profound that it felt like the noise began physically swirling around me. Yet, I distinctly remember hearing the knocking from within the wall behind me. Tap, pause. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, tap. I held my breath. 3, 4 to 2, the screen opened. I clicked unlock, twisted the knob, pushed my body against the door, and spilled out onto the street. The gallery. When I arrived last night, a few hours after Anthony died, something was different. The woman slithered out from the crack and started moving towards me. I met her halfway next to the spiral stairs. She grinned at me from the floor. For the first time, I asked her a question. Why could I not sense that Anthony was going to die? She glided up my leg, draping her spine over my shoulders so she could be eye to eye with me. When she spoke, her sentences lacked the 1-3-4-2 rhythmic structure I'd come to know her by. Her voice was high-pitched and raspy, and her mouth didn't actually move when she talked. She just kept it ajar and the words flowed out. Because he was never supposed to die last night. You were supposed to die last night. That's what was written. You can't foretell something that's never been written. Her grin became sharper at the corners of her mouth, rapturous and grim. But I intervened. You'd never get to the gallery unless I did something about it. Took a lot of work and planning, but I did it. We did it. Then it was her turn to ask me something. Are you ready to see what's below? I nodded. Immediately, the down arrow above the elevator lit up bright red, and a chiming sound echoed through the gallery. The doors opened, and I gasped. There was the headless body of a woman standing motionless inside the elevator, wearing a silver cocktail dress with the edges of a bloody hospital gown peeking out from underneath. She held a balloon in her hand. The side of it read, "Happy Birthday," in a rainbow of colors. The woman's head and her spine slithered ahead of me. It scaled the decapitated body and inserted its tail into the dry flesh between the body's collarbones until the head was snugly attached. I walked over and stepped in. The inside glistened, polished and reflective like a mirror. For the first time I saw myself as I was within the gallery. I'd always assumed I was the same age in the waking world that I was in the dreams. But I wasn't. I was much, much older. And that revelation really got me thinking. Maybe the gallery has never been a dream. Maybe it's been more of a premonition, a vision of the future. The sight of a colossal marble coffin towering above the ruins of an ever-burning city, an altar to the new gods of a new age. The woman's newly fastened head turned to me and whispered, "If you wake up before we get there, that's okay. You're finally safe. We can try again every night without fear. Eventually, with enough practice, you'll make it over the apotheotic threshold. We can bring this all to fruition, my love. My single-armed Valkyrie, my deep red moon, my one and only daughter." Then I woke up